Farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And, of course, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. It is great to have you join us here today. And make sure that you continue to tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, anybody interested in agriculture about RealAg Radio, and a great opportunity for you to keep up to speed on all things that are happening in Canada and the U.S. when it comes to agriculture. Today on the show, well, I got to admit, I'm a little jet lagged. Yesterday was a big day of travel. Opened the day. It was the keynote speaker, getting the meeting off to a start, which is always a little bit of pressure, I have to add. I was in London, Ontario at the AgriMart meeting, and they had all of their dealers from Ontario and from the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, into one place. And they had a great 2 days of learning. And it was a fantastic opportunity and really an honor to be able to address some of those, key retailers that are serving farmers across the rural countryside, making sure they have the right advice when it comes to agronomics and, helping them set the crop plan and lots of decisions. And they really are that, one of those key pieces of helping out a farmer make some of those key decisions. So we talked about some of the different, some of the big current issues that are impacting agriculture. Of course, we talked about trade. We talked about the farm economy. We talked about some politics stuff. It was great fun. I do appreciate AgriMart for having me. The thing was, I was on the stage at 8 a.m. Eastern, and I was coming from the Mountain Time Zone. So that's like hitting the stage at 6 a.m., the time zone that I was coming from. Woo! Talk about shoot me up with some caffeine to get me ready, because you want to have some energy, right? You're the opening speaker. You got to set the tone for the day. And right after me was Pete Johnson. So it was great to be able to catch up with Pete. And he asked some questions and he challenged me a little bit, which was really good. It was a lot of fun. And it was great to have Real Agriculture kicking off the AgriMart meeting in London, Ontario. And it's a big day of travel yesterday after that. So it's great to be here with you today. Okay, today we are going to hear from Senator Rob Black. Bern Tobin had a chance to catch up with him last week at the OFA annual meeting that happened in Toronto, just right beside the Toronto airport. So we'll have that. I've also got Jody Lawrence, a commodity broker out of Nashville, will be with us here today. We've had him on the show before. We met him at the Helena meeting, the Innovation Expo that happened back in Memphis, Tennessee, back in July. You remember that show? So met Jody there. Also, when I was at the Ole Miss football game back in October, was able to catch up with Jody and his son, who do a great job advising farmers across the Midwest and into the South. And of course, you're at an Ole Miss football game on the Grove. You got to have a cold one. And we, of course, did that as well. So it'd be great to catch up with Jody, what his thoughts are on what's happening in these markets. And with so much happening in the world right now, I think, and maybe I should say backed by popular demand. Could we say backed by popular demand? We're going to do some news today. That's right. We're going to bring back the news segment. Did not push it out of the lineup of the show for any specific reason. Just, so many interviews and things happening. But I feel like doing some news today. So you let me know what you think. Should we make the news a regular piece of the show or just sporadically? I would love to hear from you on that. I know some of you have asked, what happened to the news segment? You like where we read the headlines and then provide some opinion on it? We'll do that today. Looking forward to it. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can, of course, find Real Agriculture across all the different social media media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Now, speaking of trade, interesting opinion column in the Globe and Mail. And why it's interesting is, I like to hear from people that, there's people like me that, do some reading and some listening and connect some dots and provide some perspective for you, okay? But I am not inside the room. I'm in the hallway, but I'm not in the room. And so whether it's through interview or it's through, when somebody like this does a writing piece, from the source of someone that's in the room, I think it should carry some weight, because this is somebody that's not, connecting dots. This is somebody that knows what they're talking about because they sat across the table from the other side. Like, they were doing it. And so this person is Steve Rahul. He was Canada's chief trade negotiator from 17 through 2021. He led negotiations that resulted in, of course, the CUSMA or USMCA agreement. His adversary, or, on the other side, of course, from the U.S. perspective, was former USTR Ambassador Robert Lighthizer, who has been, we're going to get to it in the news, is not in Trump 2.0 cabinet. Why is that? But anyway, so what Verhoeven points out in this column, and I encourage you to go to Globe and Mail and read it. He says the Prime Minister's visit to Mar-a-Lago last week was an important step in establishing relationships between Canada and the incoming U.S. administration, but this country has a lot of work to do to get ready for a President-elect Donald Trump's second term. Well, I agree with Mr. Verhoeven on that. So what is he saying here? He continues, there was a key advantage for Canada last time when we renegotiated North American free trade in Mr. Trump's first term. That advantage was its Team Canada approach. Representatives of all political parties in the federal government, all provinces and territories, and industry and labor were solidly united behind Canada's strategy and approach. The political environment is very different now. As Mr. Trump vows to impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada, there will be an election next year in Canada. Everyone knows what the polls look like. There's a more fractious relationship with provinces and territories, with key players not hesitant to express discordant views on federal issues. Unlike the last time, Canada doesn't have the advantage of starting with the united front. This is a problem. Different messages coming from different quarters and no unified strategy creates openings for the other side. As a key example, the call by some for Canada to pursue a bilateral agreement with the United States without Mexico has some unnecessarily created unhelpful negotiating dynamics for Canada and strained relations with a useful ally. Although the relationship had its ups and downs in the last negotiations, Canada and Mexico worked together to successfully thwart some of the most extreme proposals put forward by the United States. Now, just break for a second. I will tell you that I interviewed Mr. Verhoeven going back to, it was last February, last January when he spoke. He was at the Canadian Federation of Agriculture meeting. And we've had him on a couple times. Kelvin's interviewed him as well. And he talked about some of the, in reference to those extreme proposals. He said, if they had gone with some of those initial proposals that the U.S. put forward, there would not be a free trade agreement. That's how extreme that's how he felt how extreme they were. His column continues. While Mexico needs to line up with Canada and the U.S. on some issues, such as how to deal with China, the country is a critical part of many supply chains in North America. And the reality is that without it, Canada and the U.S. would be less competitive in global markets. So he's saying that, 1 + 1 + 1 = 5, not just 3. Canada and the U.S. having a free trade agreement would not be the same economic powerhouse that all three together would be. Now, just to stop this is my words, not Mr. Verhoeven's, but I've been saying that in a lot of my speeches over the past, 2-3 years. We do have differences amongst the three countries, but we have to move forward and get past that, especially as we see the BRICS countries aligning and at least threatening to have this common currency and this relationship. Now, I think there's some doubts on if they can actually get themselves organized. There's some pretty nefarious, selfish characters that are involved in the BRICS alliance, so to speak. But we really need to be thinking about the North American economic zone more so? How do we leverage each other in combat? And I don't mean military combat. I mean economic combat versus the likes of India, China, Russia, Brazil, and the rest of South America. So, Mr. Vahul continues, given the current context, the key to building a successful Canadian coalition this time is to start with industry and labor, not the political side. Start with labor, he says. When we negotiated the USMCA, Canada had a big advantage because of the amount of time the negotiating team spent in the preparation with industry and labor representatives. This wasn't just to meet with them to provide updates, it was to discuss and develop strategies. We learned their issues inside and out, and they understood our strategy in great detail, and they bought into it. The U.S. barely consulted its industry, which gave us an advantage at the negotiating table, both through deeper knowledge of issues and more gamed-out strategies. But last time, we did not need to begin with engaging industry and labor. That had come naturally as a part of an across-the-board effort by the federal government with everyone on side. This time around, organizing the Canadian side in the same way is still a work in progress. And amid the fractured political climate, some industry representatives are exploring the creation of their own coalitions. What he's talking about there is Alberta, for example, going alone. And talking for their own interests and not necessarily Canada. So I encourage you to go to the Globe and Mail and read the rest of it. Quite fascinating. There's a lot I agree with. There's other things I would probably want to ask Mr. Vahul and, challenge him, but get a little bit deeper perspective on what some of this prep actually looked like. But fascinating stuff. So I encourage you to check that out. It did, a lot of talk about Team Canada right now. We heard Christy Clark, former BC Premier, last week talk about Team Canada approach. What I've been saying is, and I think we have sort of seen it a little bit already, is what kind of reaction Canada is going to get on this Team Canada approach. I think it's a lot frostier. I've said this before. I think we're going to see a lot more pushback. I mean, and in the room, behind closed doors, we're going to say, you know what? Yeah, love Canada, love the trade agreement, but publicly, it's a lot less. There's a lot less political efficacy to talking about the benefits of trade with Canada currently, as protectionist sentiment has definitely risen in the U.S. and there's a lot of support right now behind the idea of pretty widespread, significant Trump tariffs. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Encourage you to check that out, the Globe and Mail. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got Jody Lawrence. We're talking markets right after this.
At Vaterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaterstad, we look forward to growing together.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on this Wednesday. Right now we're going to talk to Jody Lawrence from Strategic Trading Advisors. He is out of Nashville, Tennessee, but he joins us right now out of North Carolina, where he's, of course, like he's always doing, talking to growers. Hey, Jody, how are we doing?
I'm great, Shaun. How are you today?
Man, I'm doing...
How are you? Glad, appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, great to chat with you again, as always. And Jody, there's a lot happening in this market. I guess you do a lot of grower meetings where you're talking face to face, giving presentations on the markets across the U.S. And that gives you a really good opportunity to have those sidebar conversations with growers where they come up to you afterwards and ask you a bunch of follow-ups. What are some of the main things you're hearing from a question perspective from growers right now?
What is the catalyst? Where is the optimism in these markets? Because as you know, and the whole agriculture industry is built on a base of optimism because there's so many uncontrollable factors, the weather, certain costs, what's going to happen in the markets. But everybody wants to find what's that silver lining. Everybody understands the black cloud that we're in right now, or certainly is approaching, and we've been under, for about seems like the last, at least, it's 18 months. And they're looking for that event. And I try to point out that the sustainable aviation fuel and 45Z, that's still a wild card that's out there. Is it an enormous unknown black swan event if that starts to turn into a positive demand driven issue for domestic soybean production? And it's certainly not an unknown, but then you go into what happened yesterday in between the conflicting news reports. One of them said that Treasury Department was not going to decide on 45Z, and then another news Reuters, I believe, came out and said no, that statement was wrong. That the Biden administration and the Treasury Department is going to make a decision and get 45Z passed before the end of the year, or at latest before inauguration. So that to me, it revolves a lot around the used cooking oil imports, the dollar tax credit. But the positive thing, that's what everybody wants. And I understand this. We've all been in the industry so long that we're all built on optimism. And that's the thing that I see that I'm hopeful about. It's not weather related, because I think simply South America's weather, this no Nino year growing season that they're in, we're getting past the point of no return, that even if it turns hot and dry towards the end, you're not going to make a significant difference in their bean crop. So the optimism is what everybody wants to have, some to have a ring to hold on to, and that's the SAF program.
Yeah, but and Jody, as everyone looks for that bullish catalyst, we see that the Purdue CME Ag Barometer, very positive. I think it was the most positive month since like 2021. And the markets, like if you look at, like, just pick on corn for a second. Like, isn't it a kind of a positive, maybe a good news story? We got March 25 in the near month, corn trading about 431. At the time of us having this discussion. I can remember like 6 months ago, there was people talking about 350, 325. We've done a lot better, considering there's been a lot of, you think about the where this year's corn crop in the U.S. worked out to be. We've held up pretty good, haven't we, considering all the kind of the bearish tone to a lot of things that we've experienced in 24?
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because you look back to the September futures first notice day, and I'm looking at a chart that right before first notice day, when farmers were forced to either roll or sell whatever they had already delivered or had in store from the 23 crop at the elevators, the market's bottomed out, and this is just the March contract right at, let's just call it 404. And then we put in, a full 47 cent rally. We're in the upper third of that now, 30 cents off that low. So it's holding up well. And you look at today's ethanol number, we are running at a pace to use somewhere between 5.55 and 5.6 billion bushels of U.S. corn for ethanol consumption, and that's going to be a record. there's certainly not a demand issue for corn. Corn issue is the 183 record national yield, and there's just too much of it. Because had we just had, it's always funny to say this, because this year should be a victory lap for all of our meetings, for these shows, for everybody we talk to. We should be going out and patting every farmer we see on the back. Congratulations. This is the first time in a long, long time that we've produced two back-to-back record crops, corn crops on bushel per acre yield. And when you look at the bigger picture of it, the weather hasn't been, perfect. Far from being perfect in 23 and 24, but yet like you said, we've got an oversupply problem right now. We've got a demand working its way through, and a corn market right now that's really being held back by low bean prices because of what's going on in South America and China's economic problems, and that Russia and Ukraine wheat is so cheap and they're just flooding the market with it. I think it's a valid point to say March, May corn could easily be 450 to 470 if they were trading in their own bubble.
Interesting. Global veg oil complex. Of course, a lot of our listeners very interested in soybeans, a lot of canola growers, veg oil demand. What have you seen in that respect?
This goes back to the bright spot of SAF and sustainable aviation fuel, that whatever the new trade policy is going to be through Trump, and whatever the new EPA chairman or Secretary Zellman takes towards biofuel, that bean oil use and corn used for ethanol is going to be right in the crosshairs, unfortunately, of what we think is about to happen. The world bean oil use is good, not great, but there's so many beans that it's impossible for the population growth and the demand growth, with China's economy being bad and population growth slowing, especially now that we're 5 years, hard to believe, almost 5 years after COVID, that we are now at a situation where just normal trendline yields will outproduce the growth of what world demand growth is, how that also compares. So, the numbers aren't terrible if you took them and said, okay, if we had normal production, if you didn't have record U.S. yield, if you had a record yield of 178 instead of 183 in corn, if you had Brazil producing last year's crop was a record and not potentially 660 million more bushels, the real issue that we are seeing on everything is that the genetics, the practices, the equipment, the technology, when you get the right amount of water and weather, the industry can do such a fantastic job that we can outproduce ourselves in a very cannibalistic nature, unfortunately. And that to me is the bigger problem. The bigger problem is the production. It's not the demand.
Is there any concern, or is the soybean market at all reacted to the involvement of RFK Jr. in the administration and his, pretty strong position against seed oil use? Is that kind of a wait and see from a market perspective? What have you heard there?
I'm trying to balance where now that we have, a lot of the smoke is cleared. If you just take Elon Musk and the government efficiency with Ramaswamy, let's start at the top. If that truly is, if he's going to have a lot of influence over every secretary in every department, then government cuts, budget cuts, things like that, work their way through all of it. Now, when you get to Kennedy and his positions on so many issues that are extreme in either party, not just the fact that he is clearly the Kennedy name is a Democratic iconic name he became more moderate, I guess, in their terms. And now you would even consider him kind of a fringe Republican, a lot of stuff that he thinks. So he's really hard to figure. My hope is, and then you go over to Zellman and the EPA policy about we're going to be about domestic crude production rather than biofuel production. Where's the pecking order in this? If it starts with Musk and everybody else begins to take a back seat, that efficiency in their departments is part of it, but if Zellman and all the trade guys, it's tariffs without using tariffs as a hammer in negotiation. Is it trade wars with China simply to get them the carrot on the end of the stick would be phase one participation. There's so many unknowns that I would love for all of your listeners to be able to give them an answer that okay, this guy is, and I'm going to use at the risk of really bad pun here, whose voice in that room trumps the other voices.
Yeah.
And, who has President Trump said, okay, he's not my chief of staff, but, is Musk the most important person? And then Kennedy has to defer to him in some capacity, and Zellman, and you just work your way down the list of appointees.
Yeah, and I think with so much focus on the slogan "America First," I just have a hard time believing that we're going to make some sort of big move on eliminating seed oil use in some foods, and that's a benefit to, say, Brazilian tallow imports. No matter how you feel about seed oils versus tallow, I don't think that flies either as a policy. Like, hey, we're going to hurt the American soybean grower. We're going to import a whole bunch of Brazilian tallow. Because I just that to me is where the rubber hits the road, and I'm a little less. I'm not confident that that one's gonna fly. But that's how I look at it.
Well, and you look at it simply from a political standpoint. Trump did what he felt like he had to do, that he had to make some sort of deal with Kennedy to get his endorsement.
Yeah.
Because that was part of the wild card. And in retrospect now, it doesn't look like the Kennedy votes were the ones that swayed, Trump to such a decisive victory. But this whole political process, it's about who ultimately is going to be able to make the better deal. And for now, I've got to think it's like you said, I think it's logistically impossible for us to say from a health standpoint, okay, we're done. We are not going to do this anymore. We are changing every company that makes it, because I can just see Kennedy going in and sitting at a board meeting of Kraft and saying, oh, by the way, you literally have to change the process by which you make every food that you make.
Yeah. I can imagine the response from the board of directors in those cases. Hey, Jody, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really do appreciate it. And it was great to catch up with you when we were in Oxford on that little bit of a road trip at the Ole Miss versus Oklahoma game. And hopefully we get a chance to connect soon. Absolutely, Shaun. Anytime, any road trip we're up for. And wish everybody, if I'm not back on before the holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year to everybody, and have a safe season. Yeah, same to you, my friend. Same to you. Okay, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
What's next doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
happens here.
Here's what Wheat Pete's word on RealAgriculture.com is all about in under 30 seconds.
It's It's wheat time. I love wheat time. I love wheat. Get that sulfur on. Get that seeding rate right. Get that nitrogen on your wheat right. Get that protein. Know your variety. Know when you need to put fungicides on. Pick your product. Pick your rate. Do the right job. Get this wheat crop right. Have a nice day. Grow amazing wheat.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment is brought to you by Blackhawk EVO from New Farm. Blackhawk EVO is the next evolution in pre-seed burn-down herbicides powered by Duplasyn technology. Blackhawk EVO delivers fast, flexible, and complete control of early germinating and winter annual broadleaf weeds. Find out more by going to newfarm.ca. Last week in Toronto, right beside the airport, stayed at the hotel many times, Toronto Hilton, or Airport Hilton, I should say. The OFA had their annual meeting. And Bern Tobin, he makes it a kind of an annual affair. He always goes. It's not too far from where he lives. And took in the day and a lot of different discussions. You heard yesterday, Drew Spolstra was on the program. Lindsay had that piece of audio. One of the other pieces of audio that we got from the event was Bern Tobin had a chance to catch up with, often referred to as the agricultural senator, although maybe a little bit unfair in the sense that we do have more, we have now Senator Robinson as well, who clearly has definitely an ag background. But Senator Rob Black, he was in attendance, and Bern Tobin had a chance to catch up with him. Let's hear that conversation.
Bernard Tobin here at the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, AGM. I am catching up now with Senator Rob Black, fair to say the hardest working senator in Canada. How are you doing, sir?
Good, thanks, Bernard. It's good to be here. It's been a whirlwind few days, for me anyways, and so it's good to be here and chatting with folks here.
Now, you just flew in from Edmonton. You were there yesterday checking out, how horses are loaded and shipped for transport. Part of the discussion around Bill C-355 banning live horse trade. This is something you deem necessary. You like to get out and see what the issues are and what's happening with a bill, with the legislation.
I think it's important, Bernard, to understand all sides of the issue. So I have talked to horse farmers who have horses that are sold live to Japan. And I've also talked to folks on the other side of the bill, animal justice, and to hear their comments. So over the last day and a half, I traveled to Edmonton to a horse farm. 99 horses were loaded onto trucks, and we followed them to the airport. They were offloaded into crates, 3 per crate. They were not crammed in there, pushed in there. There were 3 per crate. They had lots of room in those crates. And then those crates were loaded onto a Korean airline to be flown to Japan. I think it's important to know all sides of the issue before I can better stand up in the Senate chamber and talk about the issue.
So I'm just going to interrupt there for a second. You've heard me talk about this bill a lot in the past. I remember we had Nathan Finney from CCA on the show, and him and I got ranting about this. I don't know why we feel it's so imperative to step in on this bill and make this happen, where Canada couldn't be a exporter of horses to places like Asia that are important trade partners, just because horse meat in Canada is not necessarily a big thing. There are places you can get it as a delicacy, but what do we do this on cow tongue? For example, we don't eat a lot of cow tongue. You can get it, but we don't eat a lot of cow tongue in Canada. Yet we don't get all outraged about that. It's about it's about the whole value of the carcass. And so I'm glad Senator Black's getting some facts when it comes to things like this anti-horse slaughter bill. Let's continue the conversation.
You also mentioned 7 years in the Senate now, and when you arrived, agriculture wasn't mentioned very often, but now it's weekly, almost daily. What does that tell us about, the work you're doing and works that groups like the OFA here are doing to get on the radar?
I think it's important work that they're doing. As I've told folks in the Senate chamber when I arrived there almost 7 years ago, agriculture was talked about once every 3 months or so, and today it is weekly, sometimes daily. Is it a bit of my work? Yes, I hope it is, but it's also organizations like OFA that are doing good stuff and making sure that we collectively know the issues that are before us. And there are a lot of issues in the Senate chamber now. We've had three C-234 that's gone by the wayside back to the House now, but we've got C-275, C-280, C-282, and you've already mentioned C-355, which are all before the chamber right now. So there's a lot of activity going on, and I think it's important that I stand up and talk about those bills. I also think it's important that folks like OFA and other organizations get in front of my colleague senators as well.
Yeah, 234, obviously, C-234, the rule to remove, the carbon tax from natural gas and propane. It was a big fight. It's kind of languishing these days.
Yes, it's back in the House of Commons, and it's, to be honest, I'm not sure it's going to go anywhere. I think we'll see a prorogation or an election before it gets moved forward. We sent it back amended, which meant that it gutted the bill. I was not in favor of those amendments, and so now it languishes there. If the House opposed the amendments, then it would come back to us unamended, and we'd go through the process again.
Yeah, interrupting again, sorry. I just can't help myself here. But again, 234, a smart piece of... There's a lot of reasons to make 234 happen. And where Canadians are right now in terms of their opinions on the carbon tax versus some other things, I think, is there a lot of Canadians standing in front of this? Like, when you really look at the facts here and you look at some of the amendments that were made and how some things were tossed out of the exemption list. Now, I know some of you had big problems with 234 from the very beginning because commercial grain dryers are not included. Now, there is a history to why that happened in order to get this thing forward, and was a compromise that was made at one point. But still, I just kind of think it shows the ineffectiveness right now of Parliament. That we're hearing a lot about common sense. Well, common sense is not too common. And I'll believe that common sense will return to Ottawa when I see it. Less talk, more action on common sense. And I know Senator Black worked very hard on 234 to make it happen for a lot of producers in Canada. Okay, let's continue the audio. This is Senator Black talking to RealAgriculture's Bernd Hoven.
Let's talk about something that you were really, really excited about, and it's got some legs, and that is the soil health report. A lot of discussion, a lot of questions about it from the floor here at OFA. Where does this go from here?
So the government replied to our 25 recommendations just a couple of weeks ago, and as I mentioned, 13 of those were in support, 9 were support in principle, and so it's incumbent upon the Senate, it's incumbent upon organizations like OFA to now hold the government's feet to the fire and move it forward. There are 25 great recommendations in my mind, and we can't. It's 40 years, as you've mentioned, since the last soil report. I've mentioned to groups that the UN says that today 30% of our soils are degraded to the point around the world where we can't grow anything on them. If we don't do anything by 2050, 90% of the soils will be degraded. That's only 25 years from now. We've got a lot of work to do, and I hope some of these recommendations will help us lower that number and make sure that we have soil to grow our crops on.
Now let's talk about some of the other things that you're going to be doing in the Senate. You mentioned those in your speech today. You want to do some work on wildfires in Canada. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Senate Ag Committee is undertaking a study on wildfires across Canada and its impacts on agriculture and forestry. And so we're just in the process of wrapping it up. We've had around 75 witnesses over the last year of study, less than a year of study, and so that report will go to writing in the early new year, and so we'll be tabling that in the new year. It'll contain recommendations for government to ensure that we maybe don't see the level of wildfires that we've had, or if we do, how can they be mitigated, especially with agriculture and forestry. After that one, we've got a study on the books that would study food security with respect to agriculture, and I think that's so important. Across, it's not just an ag issue; it's a mental health issue, it's a social issue, and so I'm looking forward to that study as well.
Final thought, and that is on something you also touched on, in land use planning. Certainly a long-standing issue and a hot button this day, especially with the Wilmot Township, Waterloo Region issue, and that industrial complex. What's your read of that situation, and what is the role of a senator and the Senate in a provincial jurisdiction?
Yeah, so that's my dilemma, is that it's a provincial jurisdiction. So I raised an inquiry a while ago on food security as it relates to land use planning. So that's where I can walk the line and talk, because food security is a Canadian issue. And so that's how I intend to work on that. I am working with MPP Schreiner and MP Tim Lewis from that area to see how the federal government can, and it would be a federal government thing, it wouldn't be a Senate thing, but how can we encourage governments of all orders to protect farmland? And so if we can do that through ensuring that food security is paramount, maybe that's a way that I can play a role.
Senator Rob Black talking to Real Agriculture's Bern Tobin at the OFA meeting last week. So appreciate him making some time for us. Senator Black always does. And hey, just keep up the good work and continue to push agricultural issues. And Bern's right. One time, I don't know if agriculture was ever mentioned in the Senate for the most part, and we've had a lot of agricultural issues that and the private members' bills have been a big part of this. But the Senate's they're doing some work. Quite honestly, there's more happening, it seems, in the Senate right now than this happening in the House. So there is that as well. Hey, the next generation of Brandt Utroff augers is here. Now check these out. We got a video up at RealAgriculture.com on this auger as well. But they can move up to 9,000 bushels per hour. That's a lot of grain. Even, and this is critical for people in the Northern Plains and in Canada, they'll move that in the harshest of conditions, which means winter on the prairies and the plains. Visit your local Brandt dealer today to learn more. And you can find out more by going to brandt.ca. That's BRANDT, brandt.ca. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM right after this. I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today. And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey,
Crossroads, Alberta's crop conference, is back January 28th and 29th in Edmonton. Crossroads is designed to empower attendees with cutting-edge insights, technological advancements, and sustainable practices crucial for modern farming. Future-proof your farm with early bird tickets available December 31st at crossroadscropconference.ca. Okay, let's talk about, we're kind of on a bit of a trade tangent today, and here's some good news for you. Canada, free trade agreement with Indonesia. Here to talk about some of the benefits of that from a beef perspective, Dennis Laycraft, Executive Vice President with the Canadian Cattle Association. Dennis, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Shaun.
Okay, why is this a big deal?
Well, if you look at where the growth for beef is going to be, over the next 25 years, it's in this Indo-Pacific region, and Indonesia is one of the faster growing economies, 275 million people, and they like beef. So, it's a good quality agreement. The SBS chapter is one of the strongest of the agreements. So, we're constantly at this stage looking for the quality of the trade deal, and it'll be a longer term market. But right now, beef demand in that region is growing faster than world beef production. So,
Dennis, how do you define a quality trade agreement? What does that mean?
It comes down to you want to have equal to or better than. There's still a few tariffs that phase out. We're going through that with Korea, for instance. It eventually will be at an even or level playing field with the U.S., but right now we have an 8% tariff disadvantage. So making sure we have either a tariff advantage or preferably no tariffs. Then when you get into like the full systems approval, you don't get into the issues like we have with Europe. So I'd say, like, when you look at quality deals, obviously the USMCA, CUSMA is kind of one of the gold standards. CPTPP and the access we have into Japan, into Taiwan, into Vietnam are some of the, that I'd call the gold standard for trade deals and market access. So we're pursuing those so that we have equal to or preferential access to our competitors.
When we think about growing beef demand in that region, what kind of cuts? What's the market look like?
We're going to be pursuing that high end market. There's some pretty big competitors closer than we are to Indonesia. So it's really finding that high end retail restaurant trade, and there's very good interest on the trade mission. Nathan Finney, our president, and Jennifer Babcock, from our Ottawa team, are both over there right now, along with Canada Beef, and JBS is along on trade mission. So they're seeing lots of interest. 280
million people in Indonesia.
Yeah.
It's the world's fourth largest populous country. I did not know that. And it is the most populous Muslim majority country. So I guess any indications in terms of what kind of, you said long-term markets, that tells me there's some work to do here to, give some preference for Canadian products, especially as it applies to some of the tariff differences. What needs to happen in order to make that long-term situation pan out the way that Canada sees? Like, what turns opportunity into reality?
Well, with the Muslim market, you need the halal processing. So, getting set up with that, we're seeing interesting growth in the Middle East as well. So, that's part of that growth. It's developing that those customers over there that are looking for that high end, grain fed product. That's where we're going to fit in the world, and building those relations. We're not in it to be in the spot market, here for 3 months because we're a little long on product. It's about growing that and building that relationship. So, we saw that it took many years in Japan, but you look at what we're doing there now. We're seeing that in Vietnam. As we have good trade in Taiwan and, growing trade in Korea. So again, building these secure markets, and, the more diversification we have, the more we're protected. When China closed to us, we had enough diversification that it didn't impact beef like it did some other Canadian commodities when the market was interrupted. So, building that, and hopefully that sends a signal. This year, cattle may have been the most profitable enterprise I haven't said that for a long time, but it was one of the most profitable enterprises, and we're back as the number one source of farm cash receipts in Canada. So hopefully that's getting a message that, we can restock the herd and hopefully even begin to grow the herd more beyond that.
Yeah, good point. Here's another little known fact about Indonesia. 17,000 islands, Dennis. That I can't get my head wrapped around that. That is a very, very interesting region. Now, you mentioned Japan and you mentioned China. Is China like? And a lot of times we reference Japan as kind of like I'm labeling the kind of the gold standard. That's the kind of market, long, consistent buyer, interested in quality. These are all the things that Canada's talking about. China is a little bit more transactional, as we all know. Where does a country like Indonesia, where does it fit? Is it more like a Japan from an opportunity standpoint?
Well, it would be earlier on in that development cycle. They're, like everywhere, their middle class is growing. And, you've got Japan is a very stable economy. They're one of the most developed countries in the world. So, we are seeing, and, to some respects in China, we had customers there that were really pursuing, they're building kind of that high-end restaurant trade. You see a lot of steakhouses now that are starting to show up in China. We expect, you'll see the same in markets like Indonesia, and it's finding those right business relationships. And that's why it's great to see one of our larger processors over there really getting engaged with some customers.
I do want to ask you about. There's been I've seen a lot of social media, which is kind of dangerous sometimes. But there's been a lot of discussion this week about Canada registering or allowing the use of 3-NOP, and this is a feed additive to help with emissions. Talk. I guess from CCA's perspective, this is something my understanding is CCA was pushing for, and just give us some history here, because there's a lot of I don't know, ambulance chasing, or consumers. This somehow happened under nefarious pretenses, and consumers were left in the dark. Dennis, give us the goods here. You've been involved in this. What actually happened here?
Yeah, well, first of all, 3-NOP was approved in many countries before Canada, so we're kind of playing catch up, to be honest. It was approved in Europe, it was approved in the United States, approved in Australia. Could go down the list, and we're looking for it as a product that shows great potential, and it's designed to reduce methane emissions. So having access to the same tools, and it's been studied in all of these markets from looking carefully at the science. It's it's demonstrated it can be effective in reducing emissions. It's also been demonstrated to be safe. That's something we absolutely insist on. Any product that gets used in our industry has to go through those rigorous evaluations. Now, this one's a little different because it's actually, typically we approve products for animal health or for efficiency. Now we're starting to get into a new area of approving products that can have environmental benefits. In this case, it's being described as an environmental benefit. You're reducing emissions. So you're not necessarily using this product for animal health or efficiency, but for other reasons. And, we're going to see more of that, hopefully having products that are available. But again, we want them to be completely science-based, not politically based, which is a problem in some other parts of the world. You don't want people just, demagoguing everything here. You want to have, the right process that does look at does it work, first of all? And of course, we always want to make sure we're going to be absolutely behind the fact that it has to be safe.
Is it currently being used in any level of significance, or because I've heard rumors that it's not right currently, even though it is registered?
No, my understanding is maybe a few feed trials. There's been such demand around the world that first of all, it's been, it's taken a while to build up an available supply. And then, of course, when you're in that situation, it typically has a higher price when it's a shortage. So even developing kind of the market and demand around it, again, it's how you need to start to be able to quantify, if you're using it, how much of a reduction in emissions, which then can put you into a position where you could maybe start selling that. But that's all in a fairly early developmental stage. And, again, we're always going to hold to the position that we want our regulatory bodies, and we're confident they did, we want our regulatory bodies to be taking a look at these things properly, but at the same time, they're doing it in lockstep with our, other countries that we follow closely. The United States, Australia, all of them have very, very strong regulatory processes around this.
And again, this is, methane emission reductions through technology and innovation, as opposed to some sort of stick approach. So, and like you mentioned, Canada, not the first to the stage here. We're very much playing catch up. We could have a whole discussion about that. But hey, Dennis, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it. Great news on the trade deal with Indonesia. Benefit to beef producers across Canada, as well as other commodities like pork and durum and others. So thanks a lot for chatting with us about it.
You're welcome. Have a great day, Shaun.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this. If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, calling all Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and northern Minnesota growers. Pay attention here, everybody. The new Seed Omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities. First-in-class agronomy support. That's critical when you're growing a crop like canola. You need that agronomy support and free on-farm pickup after harvest. To learn more, go to omega3canola.com. That's omega3canola.com. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of growers from that region in Great Falls, Montana. Today, actually, for the Montana Grain Growers meeting. So I've been there numerous times. I've spoken at it. It's always a fun time, a great meeting, and wish I was there. Yeah. Also wish I was at Grow Canada. This is the trouble with this week. There's too much going on. We need to move some things out of this week. Yes, I'm being honest with you. It can't be in all places at once. As much as this is where we need a RealAg jet. The trouble is RealAg can't afford a jet, but you can see how it would be incredibly beneficial in a week like this. Yeah, no jet anytime soon for RealAg. I promise all you that, the staff and the listeners, you won't have to worry about that. Maybe a bus. The bus may be too much of an ask at this point. Hey, do want to mention, if you're listening here on Rural Radio 147 and you heard the interview with Dennis Laycraft from CCA, if you check out the RealAg Radio podcast version, there is an extended interview with Dennis where we talk about the registration of 3-NOP. That's the feed additive that reduces methane emissions. Some people are really attacking it, and it was somehow some sort of a slide past consumers, blah, 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 blah. Dennis I think sets the record straight on some of the scientific look at it through our registration system and how Canada was very late to the party when it came to the registration of this product. Other countries way in front of us. So check that out in the RealAg Radio podcast. Let's get to the top ag news stories of the day. The St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation has announced it will spend $350 million in infrastructure upgrades over the next 3 years. These infrastructure upgrades position the Seaway to meet future demands, ensuring resilient supply chains, according to the organization. The St. Lawrence Seaway enables ships to sail from Lake Ontario to the Atlantic Ocean, creating a deep draft inland navigation system extending 3,700 kilometers. The Great Lakes to Ocean Corridor generates approximately $50 billion U.S. in economic activity. You know, speaking of the Great Lakes, let me tell you, remember on Monday's show, Pete and I were joking about the fact about I was telling the story about the lake effect snow that I drove through. Monday night, meet a good friend, a great friend in Cambridge for a pint and supper. We had a nice chat. So I leave. I got about an hour drive to London, and then we didn't hit like the heart of some of the lake effect snow, but it was snowing. There was on the 401, there was no track. You basically had to have a semi-pass you to forge a trail for you. It was a white knuckle affair. Let me tell you, that was not fun. It was weird how Pete and I had just been talking about it on the radio, and then I'm going through this exact same experience later on Monday evening. Hey, big changes at the Canada's Farm Show in Regina, presented by Viterra. So along with other industry leaders, they're excited about changes to the CFS coming in 2025. The new dates, they're moving from June to March. It's going to happen March 18th through the 20th, and the event is already generating momentum with 80% of the spaces sold and filling quickly. Returning exhibitors include all the familiar faces, Bourgault, Farm Credit Canada, Ritchie Brothers, Thunderstruck Ag, and of course Viterra, the host. They've also got a bunch of first-time exhibitors as well. And they're having a kickoff party, and they're going to have Jelly Roll there. Jelly Roll? How is that burying the lead in the press release? That should be at the top. Jelly Roll. He's going to be there Sunday, March 16th. So that'll be a cool concert. That's pretty cool. So check it out. You can find out more. Just go to their website. It's not listed here, but go to their website and find out more about Canada's Farm Show. I'm sure that Real Agriculture will be there as well. Saw an unusual post on Truth Social from incoming President Trump. A lot of talk, like Fox News is really running with, should Canada become a part of the United States? In some ways, it kind of, in some ways, it's sort of, it's funny. In other ways, it's I'm not sure how it sits with a lot of Canadians. It may be crossing sort of the precipice of good humor, but an odd post from incoming President Trump of him on top of a mountain. Some people have said it's Switzerland. Some people have said it's the Matterhorn, with a Canadian flag beside him. And the text says, "Oh, Canada." There's 1,000 ways to interpret that post, and we don't need to get into maybe two of them, or never mind the 1,000, but definitely stirring some discussions. Also, a lot of reports, different media outlets, Wall Street Journal, Politico, Axios, talking about how Robert Lighthizer, the former USTR, was left out of the cabinet. Some saying he's frozen out because he's not aggressive. He was not aggressive enough. He was a bit of a brake pedal for President Trump in the first administration. Others, Wall Street Journal saying that he will provide sort of an outside advisory role to his protege, Greer, who was appointed as Ambassador Greer, who was appointed as the USTR. So, and obviously still has to pass. There's congressional approvals and stuff like that, but or Senate approvals. But yeah, interesting. Robert Lighthizer. That was probably the name that most people thought would be in the cabinet, not out of the cabinet. Like he's almost like, you think about the college football playoff, like where you just know that somehow the committee is going to find a place for Alabama. There's a path for Alabama, no matter what they played, what their record is. There's a path for Alabama, right? Roll Tide. Well, in this case, you kind of roll Lighthizer. Like you would have thought he for sure would have been there, and he's not. The story up on RealAgriculture.com as well. We're still awaiting details on 45Z. The Biden administration has said that they will not provide the details prior to the inauguration on January 20th. This is going to be very disappointing to biofuel supporters. Puts in a lot of questions, not only for the U.S. biofuel industry, but also for the Canadian biofuel industry, because now we're going to have the Treasury Department under President Trump providing the details. And that, I think, creates a whole bunch of more questions in terms of what this looks like. And from a Canadian perspective, I got to think this is viewed as very much a negative, especially on this domestic feedstock issue relative to biofuels. I don't think this is going to sit very well at all. Now, we talked to, or it's not going to work out very well, is what I should say. Also, to finish up, we talked about the Indonesia trade deal that Canada just completed. We talked to Dennis Laycraft from CCA about that. There's a number of different farm groups that are out with press releases. Cereals Canada, one of them. And one of the key benefits included in this agreement is a comprehensive provision on agricultural biotechnology, a first for Indonesia in a trade agreement. The agreement also includes a broad tariff elimination for Canadian agricultural exports, including cereals, and sets guidelines for sanitary and phytosanitary regulations and other technical uses of trade. Whew. Currently, Indonesia is Canada's second largest market for non-durum wheat. In 2023, Indonesia purchased 2.4 million tons of Canadian non-durum wheat, valued at 1.1 billion Canadian. Indonesia is also a market for Canadian durum. So there's Cereals Canada's perspective on that. Okay, before we let you go, I also want to mention how you can maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MNP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. Visit mmp.ca. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome, of course. We'd love to hear from you on the Real Ag listener line. The way to give us feedback is 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And we'll, of course, chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.